Hi, Eugene. I love
Hey,
the
what's up,
movie, by
Stefan?
the way.
Thank you.
I thought it was fantastic. There was such a musicality to it. I just wanted to know if you wrote it to music. Did you have music? Because it felt like the music playing was so kind of perfectly put into every scene.
Yeah, I absolutely did love the Billie Holiday and Al Green behind you, by the way. I see that. I see you. Yes, often I'll have it, like for instance, the opening song, "The Nearness of You," Nancy Wilson. I wrote that song. I wrote that scene while listening to that album and that record. So, it's yes, often there's a feeling or a mood I'm getting from the music I'm listening to, and I try to kind of write until I get to that feeling. Maybe it's melancholy, maybe it's a sense of nostalgia. So yes, I always write to music.
Yeah, I mean the soundtrack is just fantastic, and I mean also to feature Sam Cooke not once but twice, but I think it was three times I counted in the movie because he
Yeah.
is my favorite sort of musical artist of all time. I'm going down a bit of a tangent here, but how lucky are we that Sam Cooke exists?
I mean, that dancing in the street now is, with Sam Cooke in the background is just, it's iconic. When that happened, I just, I knew that it just felt like a classic movie to me, that scene of the two of them dancing in the street. So.
And how did the changing, because there's a sense of a kind of changing of an era, isn't there, during the course of this? That kind of move from kind of jazz, and I think you look at the through music, you look at the kind of more polished kind of Chuck Berry's and Sam Cooke's. So when it got into like Motown, you had people like Marvin Gaye and then James Brown coming in. It felt like there was a real changing of the era. I wondered how that sort of impacted the narrative and the romantic story in your eyes.
Well, there's also, there's also the change in jazz going out of vogue and kind of pop music coming in a big way. That was, to me, kind of interesting to investigate how often, and it definitely happens in Black music a lot, where, like, for instance, even R&B kind of went out as hip hop and, came in. And so these changes have happened throughout history. And it's interesting, the fallout and what happens to the musicians, to me, and what happened, like, do they try to alter and change this? What did Miles Davis do? Like when jazz was going out, he started, he's got a whole album with Prince with like 20 songs that none of us have ever heard, so it's interesting to watch, or watching, Stevie Wonder then, doing or Prince doing songs that had rap on them, So that was an interesting thing for me, and it parallels the changes in Sylvie's arc of coming out of the 50s and being a sort of like Stepford wife, her mother training her to be this young, perfect wife, and going into getting her own agency and a life of her own, and making choices and decisions on her own. So, with the women's movement. So those two arcs I felt were kind of cool and parallel for those two characters.
Yeah. And then my final question, I mean, the film is not political, at least not overtly so, but it's fair to say in cinema, when we see films set during this era, particularly films that focus on the Black experience, it's often entwined with the civil rights movement. And obviously, as important and powerful as those movies are in the kind of cinematic spectrum, is it equally as important to tell movies from that era that aren't necessarily kind of, that isn't a key narrative device?
Yeah, I mean, imagine if we only talked about, police brutality during this time, and we don't talk about that we have the first Black female vice president, or that we have Jay-Z, who's a Black billionaire, or Oprah, or that we have Barack Obama as president. Suppose we left all of that out and only deal with young Black men being pulled over by police. It's like we have to tell that story clearly, but we also have to show it would be a way of erasing us to show that we don't also thrive and have agency in another way, and we're not just our trauma. So that was the idea, is that I felt like we have been underrepresented during that time, and we only kind of show us depicted through the lens of our adversity. So I wanted to just tell a more human story, because it was also a very glamorous time that we in a lot of ways set the soundtrack to, So we did have the Supremes, and we did have John Coltrane, and so all of this stuff that was going on. We had Nancy Wilson going to the White House and singing for Kennedy, So we had Sammy Davis was a member of the Brat Pack, Nat King Cole had his own television show, So, and Sidney Poitier won an Oscar. So I wanted to make sure that we're also showing that and not just trauma porn, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I thought it was a really beautiful film, and yeah, like I said, as soon as that soundtrack is available, I'm going to buy it.
It's coming out, I think December 23rd or 25th, and we're going to be releasing vinyl on it too. It's a really beautiful blue disc, so make sure you try to get one of those. Yeah, it's going to be nice.
I will do. Well, thanks, Eugene, and best of luck with the movie.
All right, take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys.
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey!